Hey, what's up? It's Fast the Magician, and as the video says, I'm going to show you how to make the close-up mat that I use. I'll take you through all the materials, what I paid for them, where I got them from, what to use, and then the step-by-step process on actually making the mat. Now, you don't have to copy everything in this video. This is just what I used. So let me begin. So this is the workspace I'll be using. It's my kitchen table. Now, a couple of things to understand during this video is that aside from the items that I have priced over there, I have other household objects that I had acquired through other purchases for other tricks. For the materials that I actually purchased, I'm going to round up to the nearest dollar, so that way you have some breathing room and understand what the possible maximum amount of money you need, so you have enough money when you go to get these items. This is fabric that I got from Joann Fabrics. It's called Craft Felt Fabric. The number for this is 0289 8172 1970. It was on sale for about $5.41, so I rounded it up to $6. Next is Elmer's No Wrinkle Rubber Cement. Got this from Walmart. It was about $4.71, so I rounded it up to $5. Next is the rubber I use for the bottom of the mat. It's literally nothing more than shelf liner that I had purchased from a store called Kroger's. It's solid grip liner. And the whole roll is 18 inches by 4 feet. And this was about $9.40, so I rounded it up to $10. Self-repairing mat was about $20. The X-Acto knife was about $5, and the metal ruler was about $6. I have a respirator and medicine cap top. I have some paper, just regular paper that I had taped together. There's a fan and iron, a towel, and then there's a face cloth. As I'm using them in the video, I'll explain it. So, that being said, let me begin. You're going to need your X-Acto knife, your metal ruler, the self-repairing mat, and if I didn't mention it, a measuring tape. You're going to need 2 sheets of these, and you want to cut them a little over the measurement I'm giving you. In unrolling this width is perfect. On your measuring tape, if you start at the very end, you're going to want to go to 13. If you start at the 1 inch mark on the measuring tape, then you're going to want to go to 14. And on the self-repairing mat, it actually has the measurements for you. So in this case, I'm going to roll it here, and I'm going to go to, starting here, which would be the same at the end of the measuring tape, would be roughly at 13. So I'm going to cut it a little over 13 and with my X-Acto knife. So the easiest way to cut this is basically fold it over the point that I gave you, and then just put your X-Acto knife in and slit up the seam like this. It's not going to be accurate, but that's okay. You don't need this end completely accurate. You're just going to get it pretty much even. And I got to make sure that it's still over the 13, a little over the 13 mark, which it is. You're basically going to get a sheet like this. You're going to get 2 of them. So when cutting the second piece, using the first part of the roll, the edge on this is extremely straight. It's not only straight on the edge, but it's straight on the other edge as well, so you have 2 corners to work with, and that's going to be your baseline. You're going to cut the second piece, this one over it, a little bit bigger than the original piece you cut. And so I'm going to just use, there's going to be excess material here, and I'll explain why when I'm shaping the mat itself. So I'm going to use my self-repairing mat, and I'm going to use the metal ruler to cut into this so I can pretty much get a straight line in this the best I can. So I'm going to cut in. So as you can see, the metal ruler is going to help me get a pretty accurate straight line. Now you have 2 pieces that are roughly the same. This piece right here, the first one I cut off that has the edge, that's what I'm using as the actual measurement. So I'm going to put this piece on top of the bottom piece, and then I'm going to use the metal ruler to complete the dimensions. But I'm not going to get the accurate dimensions yet because I need the rubber cemented together to make the base. There is a non-shiny side, and then there's a shiny side. The shiny side is what is going down. Because it's rolled, you want to keep them both the same exact way. I'm using the edges here and the edges here to match up the dimensions. And again, the bottom piece is going to have the excess that I'm cutting off because I'm going to use the top piece as the actual guideline because the top piece has the closest dimensions. So I'm going to have it sticking out extra so I can actually see it. Now, before I cut those, I'm going to rubber cement them. This is why I said get the extra paper, because when I'm putting the rubber cement on, I'm going to wind up brushing it through everything. This stuff is extremely potent. Make sure you use this in a well-ventilated area or outside. And I'm going to use my respirator while I'm doing this. Because the fan is going to be on and it's going to be making noise, I'm only going to give a small demonstration to exactly how I'm doing this. So I'll explain it first. I take the edges of them, and I use the bigger piece face down first, because this is going to flip over, and this is what I'm going to use for the top, and this will be the bottom. Once I get that done, I get them lined up as perfect as I can get them. There's going to be a little bit of overlapping material on the bottom section, so I can actually cut that afterwards. I'm going to glue the entire thing all the way over, painting all the glue all over this, straight over the edge. Once I get a small section done, I'm going to make sure it's matched up exactly, and then I'm going to seal it. Now, the rubber cement should hold that in place. So once I get that done, I'm going to open up this mat this way to right where it was glued, and I'm just going to continue the process all the way through. I'm going to do sections at a time, and as it goes through, I'm going to very carefully mend it together. And then I'm going to continue pulling it back up, rubber cementing it, sealing it, rubber cementing it. So in the end, I'm going to wind up with a very straight edge here, some material that's overhanging on each end of it. Bear with me, I'm going to start this. I got to get this set up. I got to get this room ventilated. Now that you've got this glued, use a rolling pin to get any of the excess air bubbles out, or anything to roll it over. You can do anything like this. I'm going to roll from the middle outward. This way it pushes any air bubbles out, but it will also flatten the glue and push any excess glue to the edges of this, because that's where you want. But I just want to cover all angles so you don't make any mistakes when you're doing this. Do not put the iron directly on this rubber. I did this on purpose because I want to cover all angles to show you. It'll actually burn the rubber. You won't be able to do that. That is why you use the towel. The reason for the iron is twofold. One, it will completely straighten out the remainder of the mat. And two, it'll heat up any excess glue that's in there to make it a little bit more adhesive. So I put mine on wool to make it really hot. And again, make sure you put a towel between this, because I don't want you making these mistakes. But again, I did that on purpose to show you, so I cover all angles for you. So I'm going to press this down really well, and I'm kind of holding it. And I want the heat to go through because I want the glue to heat up. You have to let this dry for about an hour. So now that this is all done, this is what it looks like so far. And that's your base shape. So I have the ends matched up here, but there's excess material on this side and this side. So now that it's dried for about an hour, what you're going to do is get the edges of this clean, because there's a lot of rubber cement that comes out of this. So what you're going to do is you're going to run your finger up and down here, and you're going to find bits of rubber cement flaking off, and you're going to do that to both sides. Now you're going to trim the mat. You're going to get the bottom section even with the top section. So you're going to start with that straight edge at the very end here. You're going to line up your ruler at the very end, and then you're going to use the X-Acto knife to cut the edges of it so it doesn't cut into the straight edge. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, give you an example. And then you're going to do that to both sides. But the other side's a little tricky, so I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to overhang it a little, because that way I can match it up perfectly. you're gonna have to probably go through this a couple of times because this is rubber. Make sure you get all the excess rubber strands off of this as well. So you basically want a very clean edge. After you have that edge trimmed off, again, you're gonna want to smooth it out, get any excess glue off of this, and you're gonna find a few bumps and a few excess strands that you cut. So very, very, very carefully trim the edges of these little strands off of here. But the next side is a little bit more difficult because there isn't a straight edge on either piece. What you're going to want to do for the next side of this, remeasure this, either your measuring tape or self-repairing mat. You want to make sure that your measurement for where this is exactly how you used it. So remember, if you use the beginning of the measuring tape, make sure you did it to 13. If you use the one starting at 1, make sure you go to 14. But whatever the case is, make sure you mark that spot. I use the edge of this, and I can use my mat here because the mat has an actual measurement on it that matches up. So if I were to put this in this corner right here, that would be the same thing as having it at the beginning of the measuring tape, because as you can see, the measuring tape starts at 1 and then it goes to 2 and so forth. So having me putting it in the corner here is the same as doing that, so that's how I know. I'm still going to leave a little bit over the edge of 13 here. Most people will make a line all the way down. Don't do that. Cut off the excess material first so you get all the way through, so you have an actual edge you can use as a guide. So what you do then is after you get this, you're going to cut it here. So you actually have a section cut out like this. And then you're going to use this as the actual guide because this is the straight edge on this. And you're going to continue going from the top so you can see it. I've trimmed it literally 13 inches. And I took the edge of my ruler and I kind of frayed the edges excess. So that's what's going to cause me to get the edges frayed more to trim them so they're basically 100% clean. Unless you use like an actual cutting tool, it's almost impossible to get this straight, but it does look straight enough for performance. Now we're going to make the corners. That's where the top of the medicine bottle comes in. If you line it up exact right on the edge, so the corners match that exact rounded part, you're going to press in. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure it's on the top of the mat, not the bottom, because you're going to wind up with an indent on top of the mat, which you can use a rolling pin after that. Line it up on each corner. It'll be exact when you cut around the corner of this. So you want to press in and then cut the excess rubber off of this. So if you look at it, that's how it winds up being round. And again, you're going to kind of trim that off afterwards, but you're going to do the same thing to all 4 corners. The corners I've cleaned up, I've done, and as you can see, the imprint of the medication bottle pop inside each corner. For the felt, I put a towel down because I don't want any type of marking on the felt, and then I put the felt down. Now I put the mat on top of this. It doesn't really matter which side you use, but I just try to use the front with the front. Cut enough material so there's excess sticking off of this. As you can see, there's enough material overhanging. Now to glue this on. This is a little tricky. So first what you want to do is you want to put the felt upside down so the top is down. And then you want to make sure that you have enough overhanging material on all sides of it. Keep that exactly as it is, and then turn this over. And you're going to create kind of an indent so you can see where it's going. When you're doing the glue, it's important to understand that you can't put the same type of amount that I put on the rubber here, because if you put too much on, you will get what's called a bleed-through effect, and the glue will actually come through the felt. That can happen, and if it does, make sure you have a damp sponge or a wet sponge and just very carefully rub it out, and then rub it with your finger because it'll eventually seep through. But you don't want the felt itself sticky. As I'm going through, I'm going to do the same procedure. I'm going to do a little bit, glue it down, and then on the opposite side, take up where I went through, and then peel it back just a little bit, and then continue going through until I get all of it straightened out. I tape 2 sheets like this, and I put tape on both sides of it, so it's one large sheet, and that way if it moves, it'll be fine. I have to put my respirator on, I open the windows, and the fan's gonna be blowing. I actually wound up with a bleed through effect, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. You can see it, it's a very dark spot right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it in to get the actual glue through the felt, and then I'm going to very carefully use a sponge to get that out of there. And so it'll be a little darker, but yeah, it's starting to seep through. The felt will become a little bit weird on this. To fix any of these nicks, bumps, niches, or whatever you want to call them in this, you just keep rubbing this. Again, take your iron, and this time I put it on linen. And you can actually put the iron directly on this, and what you're going to do is iron this from one end to the other, pushing it all one way. You want it to all go in one direction, so whatever direction you start in, you finish in. So you go from one end to the other, and this will get rid of any excess bumps or nicks. This will also heat up the glue to make it more adhesive. And you don't want to keep it down too long because it'll burn. So what you do is you quickly go over it like this. And this is going to seal the glue. You always go one way. And then you want to seal the edges. This is sat for 15 minutes. And we're now going to trim the excess. I don't want anything on the top of the felt, so I put a towel down. And then I very carefully trim the edges near the rubber on the bottom of the mat here. So let me get the excess out of the way. I trimmed a lot of the excess off. Now, this allows me more accurate cutting with a pair of scissors. So I'm literally up against the rubber right now. And so I'm trying to get it as close to this as I possibly can. So I'm going to make sure I'm cutting it properly at the top. Now it's time for the final pieces, and this is just touch-up. You may have noticed that when you're cutting it, it still might be a little ragged around the edges. That's common. You're going to run into that. You're never going to get it perfect unless you have an extremely straight cut, sharp edges and everything. You also may notice that the felt is coming off of the edges. You're going to rubber cement the edges, and what you're going to do is you're going to push and stretch the felt over the very edge, and then you have to let that sit for an hour. And once that dries, you're going to do a final trim. Now, just a quick repair guide. If your mat starts coming apart at the seams, just put some rubber cement in it, seal it shut, and then rub all the excess rubber cement off of the edges. One final thing when you're ironing the edges of it again is to constantly push outward, because you're going to slightly push down and push out, so that way the fabric goes over the very edge of the rubber, and that way you'll see where you actually have to finish trimming. But then you'll have a perfectly aligned felt with the rubber. As you can see, I'm pushing down and going outward, pushing down and going outward. Now don't worry about the misshapen on this, because the rubber will actually go back to its original shape. What you're doing for this is you're just pushing the felt over the edge of the top of the rubber. So now what happens is you have a very nice seal, and I'm going to turn this over after I'm done sealing the edges of this. And then you can see where I have to trim, and then that'll be perfectly aligned. So when you do this trim, get a real sharp pair of scissors, like bandage scissors, because they are very sharp, they're very easy to use, and they can get a clean cut. Just be careful you don't cut too much off. When this is done, I'll show you the final product. Wait about an hour for this to settle, and then that's just about it. So that is how you basically make your mat. And I will be back in an hour to show you the finished product. If you're not nitpicky, then you can just use it. But again, I'm slightly nitpicky, so I want to kind of make mine as perfect as I can. And this works really, really, really well. So, that being said, I just want to say thanks for watching this video. And I hope this helps anybody trying to make a mat. And just so you know, I came up with this on my own. It's not a tutorial I watched or anything. So, until next time, Spaz Magician signing out. See ya.